Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube and you'd like to find out more about what we do, you can go to officehours.global. This week is a busy week. We've got a lot going on. Today, we're going to talk about graphics. We're talking a lot about graphics these days because we're getting ready for Office Hours 2.0, and we're kind of looking at everybody else's work. One of the best graphics packages on TV right now is the Sunday Night Football and so we're going to talk about a little bit of that. We're going to break down some of the bits and pieces there. So stay tuned for that in the second hour. Tomorrow we're going to starting to talk about surround sound. We've talked about it a little bit in the past, but we're going to talk about the different formats. What is 5.1 versus 5.14, 7.14, binaural, ambisonic. We're going to kind of start talking about those different formats and how we might want to pay attention to those. On Wednesday, super sources. So we're back to graphics. We're going to be thinking a lot about super sources as we get ready for Office Hours 2.0. And so we're going to look at everybody else's across many different broadcasts and talk about what works and doesn't work. On Thursday, we're going to talk about hosting, the best way to actually do that, or at least some opinions. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that takes. Friday, we're going to dig into second hour discussions. We're getting ready for Office Hours 2.0. And, Andy will be here next week working on it here in California, Andy and Jonathan. So we'll talk about what we want to see as we get that kind of stabilized there. And then remember that Saturday is the long day. It's a long day with a break. So we'll have education. We don't broadcast that part at 8 o'clock. And then at noon, the Belfast Method will be returning to Todd Reynolds. He's going to be playing some amazing music, and our team will be taking over his hardware from afar. So that should be very interesting. And a quick reminder that today at 10 o'clock, Apple has an announcement, and we will just cover that in after hours. So we'll be hanging out and doing our Mystery Science Theater version of watching that. We will not be playing it into Zoom. So you have to have somewhere that you can watch it that isn't Zoom. Don't ask us to do that. That is a violation of the TOS, and it doesn't work as well. So we won't go there. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the questions of Liberty. What do we have?
Our first question is from Deborah Woodfork in Washington, D.C. She asks, I have an iPad Pro 11 looking for a reliable mount to use along with a Manfrotto tripod. Any recommendations?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Although you can't tell, that is a Manfrotto tripod behind me. And Manfrotto tripods have a little quarter 20 screw on the bottom. These can go into your generic stretchy iPad things, but they can also go into the cages that are available. And I just had a double check on the Small Rig webpage, and I will put that in the chat. And they make some great cages, including ones with handles for doing virtual monitor out of your iPad.
And this is another approach to it, which you can kind of see next to me here. This is a Visa mount actually on a stretchy iPad mount. It's a generic one. I don't think it made any difference, but remember that you can use Visa mounts. So there are iPad mounts and monitor mounts that have a Visa backend, and so that means you can hook it to anything. There you go. I think that might be the one actually that I have there. Can you turn that around, Jeffrey, so we can see the back?
This is the Vivo mount. So this is the Visa mount, and then you put the iPad here.
Yep.
And it stretches on. And
so that gives you a lot of other options as far as what you use for that. Is that anything that holds a Visa, anything that holds a monitor, can hold your iPad, which is what I do. Thanks, Jeffrey. All right, next question.
Our next question is from TJ Asher. He asks, for John Pretto, how did the launch go?
Thank you for asking, TJ. My face is red now. This is not any color correction problem, and my lips are falling off. We're editing the footage right now. I haven't gotten all the footage yet, so I don't have any really good footage, but I can show this really quick. This is the flight data, and the interesting thing about the flight data here is we reached about 11,000 feet, but the rocket obtained Mach 2 speed, which is pretty significant for that rocket. So more footage coming soon, and pictures, et cetera, et cetera.
But overall, it was a success.
Huge success. It flew perfectly. It was the hit of the weekend.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic. And John, like when you get closer to it, look, we should have a second hour about the rocket. I mean, I think that's a second hour if you've got footage. So let us know when you're ready. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Thanks.
Can you hear a sonic boom when it goes through?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question.
Our next question is from Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham. While watching NFL on CBS yesterday, I saw a full 1 second out of sync video between two cameras. When cutting to a wide shot, player got up from a tackle twice. Where would this problem originate?
Go ahead, Stuart.
This is a buffer error, or it's a Jackie Chan edit technique. I'll come back to that.
Go ahead, Bo.
The buffer though is all the cameras are being played into a EVS, and sometimes the EVS, as you switch between cameras, it can play a buffer of some of the next vision. So it can be slightly out of sync. You don't see it very often. You used to see it a lot on Formula One, where they would go from doing replays and back to regular speed. The Jackie Chan thing is just for extra impact when you're seeing a punch. So maybe the director just wanted you to have
he just wanted
more
to see
impact
he
of this.
He wanted to see that player.
Event.
He wanted to see that player get up twice. Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah, so on a show like that, you'll typically be running two different time bases on your cameras. You'll have live, and then you'll have anything that goes through the yellow line system is generally 6 to 8 frames delayed. But if you were seeing a full second, then like Stuart said, what you were probably seeing was a mispunch from the live camera to a replay deck that was in E to E showing the camera pass through instead of the replay deck being queued to their mark.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
We talked about this for a second yesterday, and somebody said something about 50 ohm cables being a problem.
I'm going to guess that. I'm going to guess that Bo is probably pretty accurate on that answer.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that was talked about yesterday too.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Our next question is from Tobias Moss in Minneapolis. What were the light bulbs that Alex used to replace the lamp bulbs in the hotel rooms when on camera?
So the ones that I used were actually the hue lights. After playing with them a little bit more, I'm not sure I would use them again. As I changed shutter speeds and so on and so forth, I started noticing that I was getting some rolling and so on and so forth. I think they work pretty well as far as hue lights go. I could do it. I've now, for my next trip, which I'll be doing this weekend, you'll see me down in LA again. I'll be using the aperture lights. So they're basically the same thing. I can put them in, I can scroll them in, but their refresh rate is faster. And so I'm probably going to, lean towards those to do the replacements that I did in the past. But the hue lights worked great. It's just that as I played with them at home a little bit more and started pushing them back and forth, what's really great about the hue lights is that I was able, and the aperture lights, is being able to have an iPhone app that you just sit there while you're talking and recolor your background and make it all work. It's nifty. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I took this a little differently. On-camera lights are really low wattage. So if you're going to replace lights that you see behind you, now I see one way back there that's not low wattage, but you're down in the 10 to 20. This is just an FYI. So use very low wattage lights to be seen by the camera lens.
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, and if anyone's ever wondering, if you're going to get a rolling shutter, if you have an iPhone, put it on high frame rate, see if you see that roll. If you don't, you're probably going to be okay.
Go ahead. Let's go to the next question. Oop, can't hear you.
Our next question is from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. I've noticed a lot to wireless noise from my ATEM Mini. It will sometimes interfere with other devices in shows.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm just curious how Mitchell is able to narrow it down to coming from the ATEM, and also how are you measuring this noise?
Well, when I pick my ATEM up and put it closer to the DMX controller or telephone, it goes wonky. So it's just sort of a trial and error. As far as measuring it, I'm just not that technical, Mickey. Sorry.
So it's just a basic observation. Do you have any ideas, Mickey?
Yeah, it's sounding like it's not RF noise, but EMI, which with more affordable electronic equipment, there's not nearly as much shielding in there, or at least the standards aren't quite as tight as you would expect from higher end gear. So with an ATEM Mini Pro with a plastic housing, it certainly could be, EMI could certainly be an issue.
Sorry, I got on the wrong page. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So putting it up on stilts or something like that maybe might help on that. Cables will more likely be the problem with conducting any type of signal degradation. So plugging in the basic cables and see if that goes away. Changing up your cables could help that too.
And Mitchell, do you what specific devices are being interfered with that are affecting your other shows?
I've walked into a couple of shows where I just brought my ATEM with me, and I'm with other people, so I can't be specific about the equipment flow. But I might be next to a big Digico console, some producers with their Wi-Fi phones, and just generally people are saying, "Wow, what happened? All of a sudden, when you plugged in your thing, this is going crazy." So it's more of an observation, like you said.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm curious. Have you tried to plug it in, Mitchell, on its own without HDMI cables coming in, no networking, no USB, just to narrow it down that it is indeed the ATEM itself?
Unfortunately, no. I will do that next time. Your advice is well taken. It's just an observation.
And if you are going through any SDI, BNC cables, since those are RF transmissions, poorly terminated or broken shielding on BNC cables can spew out a ton of spurious RF.
Oops, sorry, next question.
Our next question is from Nick Batt in the UK. Is there an affordable way to get a fixed IP persistent when using Speedify?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, the fixed IP actually doesn't come from Speedify. It comes from your service provider. And it's been a long time since any of the cable or fiber service providers have actually used different IP addresses. Basically, since you've got a permanent connection, you get a permanent IP address, whereas back in dial-up days, every time you connected, you would get a different IP address. Speedify just aggregates all of those. So you really need to talk to your service provider to get that fixed IP if you don't currently have one.
Next question.
Our next question is from Tobias Moss in Minneapolis. For the purpose of recording single camera music duo videos, would you still recommend a Blackmagic camera or would you go another direction? What lens recommendation? Medium budget.
Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, man. Okay, so I don't know what a music duo video is, but I'm going to guess that he means a music video. In this case, the real trick and what makes music video production different is that you need to be jam synced against a click track for playback. So you do multiple takes over and over again, and it has to be perfectly in sync. I'll answer the lens question. The 24-70 would be excellent. Any prime, I would say, would be excellent. 100 millimeter or the 70-200 stabilized would be excellent choices.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would say like every camera system and every lens system or lens family has its own look. So I would go ahead and test different cameras to see which gives you the look that you are specifically going for. If you want the Blackmagic cameras are certainly an option. I would stick to of course, the Pocket Cinema range or the Ursa range, not the studio cameras, because they're not really meant for doing recordings. But yeah, test different cameras and see what works for you.
Absolutely. I will say that as someone who's owned over 100 cameras, if I was going to go out and shoot something, I would use either an Ursa or a 6K. At this point, I've kind of leaned into that, and it's just that especially with the 6K, the form factor, it just really works, to do a lot of those things. Now, if I'm doing a high-end film, I'd probably pick an Arri, to do it. But I have to say that with some of my tests, the Arri and the 12K are very close together in my eyes. As far as it depends on what I'd have to do. But if I had to cut budget, I'd be tempted to go to a 12K. I find that the sensor is doing very well, surprisingly well in low light, better than I expected. But I think that those are on the high end. But I think that the problem for me is that there gets into what Chris often talks about as being buy one, cry once, is that you're buying into it. The advantage of buying a Blackmagic camera is you're buying into the ecosystem. And so you're going to be able to, now I want a switcher. Now I want to add other things. Now I want to add other things. And all those things are available to you and seamless. As soon as you go out of that ecosystem, you're into a world that's just much less flexible. And I think that's the thing that I would just underline, that what you're going to end up doing is spending time and then extra money trying to tie it all together. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, many rental houses will have a whole army of cameras that you can go in and test 10 of them and see which lens combination with what camera body works for you.
Yeah, and the if you're going to go towards still cameras, the one that my walk around lens is a 24-70. Like that is just what I use. I have what I own is a 16-35, a 24-70, a 70-200, and a 100-400 with a doubler. And those are the only 4 lenses I own. They're the only lenses I'm interested in. When I need something better or something different, I rent it. So those are the ones that cover like my day to day. What I need to actually get done. Anyway, next, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, Tobias clarified live capture of a duo performing from home in the chat. So in that case, all of the above cameras are listed, but also make sure you've got a decent connection or maybe even an IP box to get that signal. Obviously, the Blackmagic ones will be easy to control with the ATEM Mini.
Next question.
Our next question is from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Has anyone tried the OBSBOT Me AI-powered phone mount? Thinking about using as an NDI camera with an iPhone XR or iPhone 12.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So this is it right here. Basically what it is, you put your phone, or you were supposed to, when I did the Kickstarter, it said you could put your phone or you could put a GoPro or anything right here. It's this piece right here that's the important part. This is the sensor. All it's doing is it's watching you if you raise your hand, if you do the zoom in, or well, actually this doesn't do the zoom in, zoom out. So it's watching your hand to see if it raises. So then it would turn on and turn off the motion display. It doesn't do any zooming. It doesn't do anything other than switching back or moving the camera back and forth. I did some initial testing, and the biggest problem is if you're moving your hands a lot, it's doing it right now. You're moving your hands, it's thinking you're raising your hand, and therefore it's starting and stopping the function. I've already talked to OBSBOT about it, and told them that they need some different gestures or a way for me to change the gestures so it works better for me.
Next question.
Our next question is from Tobias in Minneapolis. Adding PNG overlays to OBS is causing major lag and shutter. What gives? XPS 9575 otherwise running perfectly. Already close all other apps and still the problem occurs.
Go ahead, Jason.
That could be any number of things. That computer was an excellent computer 2 or 3 years ago. I'm guessing that it has something to do with the system bus or just having a GPU that doesn't play nice with OBS. I mean, not all of them do.
Go ahead, Tuomo.
Yeah, there are some generic things what you can consider when preparing assets for or overlays for OBS. And those things are like make sure that your image size is the same as your project size, so you don't bring in huge images. Another thing to keep in mind is that use a fast drive. Don't use an external drive, so use an internal drive for it. And also make sure that if there are some filters applied to your sources, so they might take up some resources. And don't try to trigger several PNGs at once.
Yeah, and go ahead, Mickey. I'm sorry, it took down. I would say that the resolution, just make sure that it's really matching up, because that is the higher resolution than what you need. It's tempting to build a ping to make it much bigger than what you need, and that will crush OBS. Next question.
Our next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He asks, what techniques have been helpful when dealing with unresponsive vendor technical support? I just had to call the headquarters of a small European synthesizer company after having no response to a case for an extended period of time.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, realize what kind of margins there might be on the product you're trying to get support from. With very narrow margins, there's very little support. So you have to go to the online forums, and you have to find a forum that they might participate in, or that they respect the people that are participating in that forum. And then you have to take your case to the forum. The forum will tell you, yes, this is a known issue with this company or not. And then through the forum is the only option I think you have.
Yeah, you really have to find the pain point if you're not getting responded to, and you want to be careful of it. I mean, the main thing is that the goal is always to find a way that people want to respond to you. So if you get onto a forum and you're fairly positive and you are, forward thinking about that, you get a better response oftentimes. Go ahead, Jason.
Only thing I would add to that is if you have a significant Twitter following, make use of it and, just hit them something nice on Twitter, like Alex has done a few times.
I do it very rarely. Like it is so, if I pull out the Twitter hammer, it means that I've exhausted all of my my things, because the bottom line is when you pull out a lot of leverage, you basically burn up a lot of capital. With whoever you're. So once you attack them on Twitter, you've decided you don't need them. You don't care. So that's a different. You just have to really decide that you want to do that. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
When it comes to things like synthesizers, there's also the recommended vendors, because the company doesn't want to deal with you directly, so they'll want you to go to their accredited vendors in your area to get support from them. So that might be a better direction to go.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing to get support, but a lot of times one of the things that also helps is if you start building up a relationship by doing things that they're interested in. So a lot of times having that kind of impact makes a big difference, as opposed to the only time you talk to them is when you're complaining about their product or you're trying to push down to it. You can get filtered out of a company really quickly. Companies just, if they decide someone's hard to deal with, they just stop answering. That's the thing that you have to be kind of careful of as well. Next question.
Our next question is from Elliot Robinson in Las Vegas. He asks, where can I find suggestions for CEO all hands meeting? There will be both live audience and a remote location audience. Live audience will participate in asking questions. Remote locations will ask questions in Q&A or chat.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, this is very complicated when you do a hybrid event with a live and a remote audience, because you're juggling a lot of pieces. And my first bit of advice would be find somebody that's going to do it for you that has a lot of experience doing that, because every time you add another element to a live event like that, you're adding another piece that potentially is going to go wrong and likely will go wrong. And also make sure that you practice, because you don't want to leave the CEO with egg on his face when he's juggling a live audience and a remote audience. And I'm sure Alex has lots of suggestions in this area, but that's the kind of advice you need. You need somebody that's been there and done that many times. Don't try it your first time around.
Go ahead, Stuart.
One of the things I hate from having done a few live things, and if there's ever a Q&A, you always end up with somebody who has got no idea how to ask their question and will be on the microphone for 5 minutes rambling, and eventually they say something and there's no real question there. If you can shift the live question and answer across to that same remote, like using a Meccano or that sort of solution, so that the people who are watching online and the people who are in the room have the same tool in front of them, like on their phone, to be able to ask the questions, people will stop and they'll think and they will type the question down clearly, and you will get a better answer from the CEO if the CEO can see a decent question. You can even put the questions come up on the screen that the CEO has got right there, they can refer to. Again, the same things that we learn about talking to people by their name. So here we're answering Elliot's question, so we make Elliot feel like we're talking directly to him because we mention him by name, or we're mentioned that we're answering his question. The CEO can do exactly the same thing. He can talk to individual shareholders while talking to everybody at the same time. So they'll get their message across better.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, two things that if done properly, most of your headaches would be gone. First would be comms between all parties, all locations. Get that right, and things would be so much smoother. And second would be mix minuses.
Yep.
If that's done right,
Yeah, and
if those two things are done, you're.
And if those folks remotely are actually asking questions live, the one thing that we did for a very, very large multinational organization about 12 years ago is we moved even their in-room. This gets to what Stuart was talking about. We moved even their in-room questions to a previous version of Makana that we built for them, and this was a long time ago. And we moved their questions to that. Within a year they stopped allowing in-room questions because after doing a couple tests, they realized that the question velocity, quality of questions, everything goes up. Now, there's always that moment where there's a great interaction between the CEO and the person at the mic, and that will happen one time out of every 10 questions. And for the other 9, you're sitting there listening to people drool on or drone on about something that no one cares about, that they care about, that no one else wants to hear. That ends with a question that no one cared about. I mean, that is, I've worked on these meetings for a decade, and that's what happens. People ask long, drawn out questions because what they wanted to do is say something. And you can give them other forums to say it, but in this process, you got to decide if you just want them to be able to make statements, that's fine. But it's just painful for everyone watching, except for the person talking. And I think sometimes it's painful for them too. So it's just really great to get that out of the way. So if you decide against that and you want to have people ask questions in the room, the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to go every other question. Person in the room, online question. In-room question, online. You have to pull the audience in. They have to have equal footing. If you do a bunch of questions in the beginning with all people in the room and then the people online, you answer a question or two, that doesn't count. And people will stop coming, because it will create frustration. So, and I would always start with the folks online. So we got a question online, we're going to ask that question. And then come to the room and ask the question. The other thing that does is it gives you much better mic management. So if you're handing out the mic, if you're not handing out the mic, but running the mic, you only need 1, maybe 2. But the bottom line is that the camera operators all know where that mic's going because they've got time. You can say, hey, we're going to go over to this. We're going to go over to mic, red mic or blue mic or whatever that is. Camera operators can get all framed up. The person can stand up. Everyone's ready to go. You finish the online question and immediately jump to them, and you've now got this. You don't have that roaming camera problem that you normally have. One thing that I recommend if you're going to read the questions is don't have the CEO read them. That's not their job. Their job is to answer the questions. What you want to do is have a person, and my recommendation is to put them into a screen. Put them in a room somewhere, put them in a closed off, put them into the screen, but put them into a screen that is either right below the camera or actually in a teleprompter. And the reason for that is it means that the CEO will answer the question into the camera so that people online, whoever was asking that question, and people online feel like they're being spoken to. So they're not just looking at the person next to them that's asking, oh, we got a question from, someone. They're like, we have a question, and they're looking right at that person and then answering that to that person. So that keeps their eye line conscious. Eye lines are super important, and you want to have them. So that's, I won't say that it works great. I'd prefer to, I would prefer them at this point. I mean, I know CEOs are going to have a hard time getting over it, but the modern CEO will stop putting people in the room, but that'll take them a little while to get used to that. Because it's just much more effective for them to just be in a room and just have them talking to everyone. Because the thing is, for most of these all hands, if you're big enough that you're going to do an all hands meeting, 90% of your audience is out of the room. So just pay attention to them. So anyway, but if you're going to do it as a hybrid, it's going to take people a little while to get over that. That would be my recommendation. Next question.
Our next question is from Douglas Carmichael. Throughout history, many of the largest mass gatherings in the world have been linked to religious observances or traditions. Do you think that hybrid ministry will advance to a point that digital first will be the default in religious communities?
Go ahead, David.
My gut is no, and I would offer 3 reasons for that. The first is that we have invested, not just financially, in the idea of shared sacred space, a space that takes us out of the craziness of the world and allows us to be fully present in the moment. Second is that much of what clergy do is best done when we're physically together, life cycle events, pastoral care, things like that. And the third reason is that we are better religious leaders when we're able to feed off of the natural energy that comes from people in the room praying and singing with us. So while I can't speak for the large churches, the large synagogues, the vast majority, the smaller ones, I don't see them going digital first.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I put a link into PTL Ministries. It used to be that the satellites is what controlled the large gatherings. And so whoever had control of the satellite network, which CDN, PTL, and it passed on through, somebody fell from grace and immediately everyone else went after his satellite network. So I put a link in about PTL. Look at the last paragraph. PTL came back, but now it's on Roku, Amazon Fire, and that kind of stuff. So I don't think it's going to become a mass large gathering, but they're moving from satellites down to the net. So who knows?
You know, I think that I think I talked about this the other day. We were working with a house of worship that started doing. They went away from hybrid, and they had physical, and then one of the other sessions. You know, they had 3 sessions on a Sunday. One of the other sessions became just a digital session, and I can't remember whether they stopped doing it or they're considering stopping doing it. Last time I talked to them, because so many people were going to the digital session that they were afraid they'd kill all the other sessions. Like, you know, like it was, and that's the thing is that they were afraid that they would actually have to start dropping the other time slots, or some of them, because there were so many people not coming to the space. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I will say that there is a massive market for, there's a massive market for an online experience. I don't think that, and I think that those eventually will become larger than the physical experiences. I don't think the physical experiences will go away. Theater's still here, and we still like to go to things, but I think that, you know, there's a market that is going to build where some ministries are going to be completely digital, you know, and they're going to have millions of followers, in that process, because they figure out how to create some of that space. And it's not whether it's the same. It's just that anytime you do a physical event, you can't address 99% of the addressable market. Go ahead, David. Oh, no. Okay. Next question.
Our next question is from Maris in Johannesburg. With summer now in full swing in South Africa, at least, any suggestions on cooling down a very hot studio without aircon noise?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, it's always duct size. You need the largest ducts you can physically build into the walls and make look good, because duct size is where air handling noise comes from, and obviously putting the fans and the blowers as far away from the physical walls of the building would be the other thing too.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, and to add to what Roscoe mentioned, make sure that the vents where the air actually enters the room are as unrestricted as possible, because the air hitting hitting the vents causes a lot of noise as well. But if you are not building a facility from scratch, or if you're not able to build in larger ducting, mini split is usually what people go for because of their lower noise.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
And if you can't do any of that, then a nice insulated trash can with ice water and a whole bunch of copper piping to kind of change the temperature of the room.
Swamp cooler.
It works. Yeah, it works. And there's many different ways to do it. But the other thing is also figure out your hot and cold. Make a hot area and a cold area. So put all your electronics that are generating heat over there. That's where you can vent it out. And then in the other area is going to be the cool area, so you can get your work done.
Yeah, it is. The other thing to think about is with a studio is whether you need it on all the time. So a lot of times what we've done when we have some air noise is that we cool it down a lot more than it would need to be. And it depends on how long your hit is. Now, sometimes this isn't going to work, but a lot of times we'll drop that down to, what would be in Celsius, probably 16 to 17 degrees, so really, really chilly. And then we've actually tied our AC in one studio. We tied the AC into the on air. So we click on air, it just turns the AC off. And then we do the shoot or whatever, allow it to raise up. And this has gotten so much easier now that we're on LEDs. So, that definitely, if you're not on LEDs, you want to be on LEDs. You also want to get all of your equipment that doesn't need to be in that room out of the room. Those are all heat generating. And then we also use that as an opportunity to get all the other people out of it. So if you're dealing with a studio that only has a handful of people in it, and LED lights, and you can cool it down before and after, a lot of times you can get a very quiet studio. Go ahead, Stuart.
We could delve into fluid dynamics if we wanted to go really crazy on this subject, but it's probably advisable to not skip. That would be a whole week of second hours. But one thing you want to realize is you want to get volume of air, not speed of air movement. And this is actually the same as cooling a car. If the water goes through the engine too fast, it doesn't pick up the heat. As air goes through a large volume, if you're cooling an audience down, the air's got to be moving slow enough to be able to pick up the heat from them. One of the ways of doing that, besides having really huge ducts and getting rid of the vanes on the outside of the ducts, is actually to put a large hanging baffle, like a curtain, up in the rafters, hanging down in front of where the air is coming out of the ducting. That way the air spreads out as it falls. Right? So it's allowing massive amount of volume moving at very slow speed, and that takes the heat away with it. So, and that reduces the noise.
Next question.
Our next question is from Dennis Champion Walker, South End on Sea, UK. I'm trying to bring vdo.ninja into vMix. The video works fine, but no audio comes into vMix. Should it just work, or is there an additional step I need to take? It works just fine in OBS.
And that's Stuart.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you to those people in After Hours who helped me do a test of this into vMix last week. We had 4 phones coming in from around the world, and it came in exactly the same as any other source. Just go through and make sure that you've got the green audio button, and I'm looking at my vMix screen, by the way. On the incoming channel, the audio button has to be pressed or lit up with green. So does the channel selection, whether it's going to master, channel A, channel B, and the speaker symbol on each channel as well. So it's 3 different steps that you've got to make sure are lit up green before it actually makes it to your output level. And I'd say that's probably what you're facing, Dennis. You might have just mixed one. And if you have any more questions on that one, ask me in Discord.
All right, next question.
Our next question is from Douglas Carmichael. If you were producing a digital-first event targeted towards emerging markets, would there be CDNs or other distribution infrastructures closer to said markets, say MTN and other African mobile networks, than others?
Yeah, the real challenge is getting between the countries. And so a CDN, what you have to do is figure out a way that you're going to distribute that live video across. It's relatively easy to get VOD video because it can be cached in those countries. Live video distribution between those countries can be a little bit challenging. And so one of the problems is you don't have a lot of edge servers that are sitting in those countries. And so it becomes a higher latency and lower quality stream oftentimes. And so that's a real challenge. Like a lot of times when we were doing streaming for YouTube for a long time, for instance, it was like the server was like in Brussels. So it was so we had to kind of that becomes the real challenge as far as getting that quality. So VOD, yes, live, much harder. And so you just have to be careful of how that goes. And a lot of times one of the ways that you can solve that is to work with CDNs that are going to allow you, or if you're able to design it, increase the latency. So you want to basically increase the amount of time that the whole stream takes to get to everyone. So when you increase that to like a 1 second latency or 1 minute latency, instead of trying to get into ultra low latency or whatever, you end up giving all of those networks a little bit more time to get those packets to the viewer, and it keeps everybody synced up together. Next question.
Marius in Johannesburg asks, any thoughts on the new live video feature in Keynote? Looks like a great way to mirror an iPhone, iPad, or even multiple devices with graphics to use for demos in Zoom.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yes, it certainly is. And I believe we did something on 10.7 to that effect. If you look at the second hour, you can see a whole bunch of experimentation, as well as Alex being more giddy than I've seen him in a long time about a feature.
David.
Yeah, it's a great little feature. This is it right here. I'm just waiting for them to bring in some sort of virtual camera so we can get out of Keynote into other platforms.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge right now is getting in and out of Keynote via virtual camera, because what you really want is Keynote to publish itself as a virtual camera to Zoom, and you also want it to be able to see virtual cameras on the way in. But fixing that little problem fixes it for many, many people. And I know that Jason makes fun of the fact that I get very giddy about Keynote, but I think that what gets me excited about it is that I get excited about everyone being able to do something, and so I love high-end graphics, and I love the, I'm most of my day is working on stuff that is just barely possible, in the broadcast world. But what is really exciting to me is when you end up with systems that everybody can get a hold of, that can communicate, and Keynote is bar none the most powerful communication software in the world. Like the ability to take your ideas and to put those ideas in front of a lot of people. There is no single product that is as powerful as Keynote to do that. Now it simplifies all those things, and I get frustrated that I don't have keyframes and I don't have things like, there's pro features that I'd love a Keynote Pro that basically was like a mesh between Motion and Keynote. But I think that what's amazing is watching what teachers can do with it, what individuals can do to share their ideas. And let's face it. I mean, most of these large companies that we talk about, their entire company runs on decks, and most of those decks are created on Keynote. so it's that's the reality. As someone who's kind of worked in the innards of a lot of that, you just see Keynote decks everywhere. And usually, when you see there's some companies that, of course, use slides for obvious reasons. But even there, you see Keynote decks, because when they want to when someone wants to pull off the gloves and do a presentation, they'll want to step forward and look better than what everyone else is looking at. They'll jump into Keynote just because it gives you a lot more power. And I've done whole videos on Keynote. Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, for the record, I adore Keynote. It's probably where I spend more time than anything else, and it's made me more money than any other single application I've ever used. It's anti-aliasing and kerning are unmatched, and I will actually take PowerPoint and turn it into Keynote, and my clients don't even know until afterwards.
Yeah. So it's a that's why we get excited about it. And when they add a feature that I think what caught me by surprise is they added a feature that I didn't even think was possible. Like it didn't even occur to me that they would even do that. And the more I play with it, the more interesting it gets. So anyway, we'll talk about it more. And we've talked about it a lot already. so we'll keep on asking those questions. We'll probably have some more labs on it in the future. Next question.
William Colvin in Cushendom, North Ireland asks, does Alex or the panel still recommend the Logitech C920 as a low-cost option to give a much better alternative to the inbuilt cam? Thanks.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
William, the C920 had its day. It was the main go-to quickie camera. I've got one over my right shoulder right now. But today, if you want to get in cheap and you want to stay with Logitech, the Brio is making noise. In fact, if you're looking at gallery view and I asked the panelists to raise their hand, which are using Brio, I think you'd see quite a few of them raise their hands and say, yes, we're using it and it looks great.
Go Jeffrey.
Yeah, one of the panelists was using the 920, and it's still a great web camera, and it'll still do the job, especially if you're doing any type of live stream stuff like that. But there was one problem when they switched from a 360 view to a 1080 view. That's when the camera decided to make a switch, and then you would see a zoom in happen or zoom out happen when that happened to them. So just keep that in mind if you're going to use that for high-end zoom 1080p video type situations.
What is that? There's a snap going on, right? It'll snap back when you highlight that person. It is snap. If you've zoomed in on it, it seems that it snaps back to the widest point. Have you noticed that?
Well, we noticed it with one of the panel members here, and then that's what was explained, and I don't remember exactly how that worked.
Yeah. Tuomo?
So this one is 920. So it works. It's not perfect, but it gets the job done.
Yeah, I still think Logitech is still way out ahead of everybody else as far as the quality goes. And I think that's I buy them all, like the new Dell, the new Elgato, and I immediately put them up and immediately go, no, still haven't, and because I want a new one. The exterior of the Dell the Elgato feels like it's a little cheap. The Dell is the best machined exterior of a webcam I've ever seen. I mean, it's just the industrial design on the Dell is just amazing, and they didn't close it with a great sensor. Like it just, it's just, and you're just like, really, and yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I think what we noticed is that when Zoom only needs you in a gallery mode, it just needs a little image of you, so it didn't need anything more from the camera. As soon as that person became the speaker, suddenly they wanted to pull the 1080p into speaker mode, and that's when it zoomed out the camera to get all those pixels to fill that 1080p screen.
Well, and I think that might happen with the 920s and not with the the Brios.
Correct.
Because it's asking for I want the 1080, and it's probably a function of us being at 1080. When you do it with a Brio, it doesn't. I don't think it bounces. I think it's just with the 920.
I'm on a Brio; it does not bounce.
Yep. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, had my first problem with an M1 16 gig. It didn't like editing a 90-minute video on Final Cut. It gave me a memory error. Is everyone still editing on Intel?
Editing on Intel. I've heard of that. Go ahead, Jason.
Editing on Intel? No, the answer is absolutely not. Like, not even a little bit. I had a similar, I've only had one memory issue, and my immediate thought on the matter is that you should go into just run it through Edit Ready, run it through something that's going to standardize your codec. I have a feeling that it's trying to do the intermediate codec in real time, and with 90 minutes, it's possible that you can run out. You also may have too many or misbehaving plugins that are messing with Final Cut.
Yeah, well, and I'd be curious, what format you are trying, the 90-minute video, what format? To Jason's point, it doesn't say in your question, but I'd be super surprised if you were starting with Apple ProRes. Like if you had a 90-minute Apple ProRes file, and I won't edit anything other than Apple ProRes. Like I literally just, whatever you give me, I'm going to put it into compressor and make it Apple ProRes. And I decide, depending on whether it's 422, LT, HQ, 444, but I'll decide what Apple ProRes, but I don't edit on anything other than that if I'm using Final Cut, because I know that they tell you can do a bunch of those things, but you're running into the problems that you run into. And it's not just Final Cut. We've had issues in Premiere and Resolve where it will play back in the timeline and work perfectly in the timeline and then crash on render. So the rendering pipeline and the timeline pipeline in all of those apps, I don't have the experience in Avid to know whether it does it in Avid. I think Avid requires you to go into AVR. I don't know if it does that anyway. But with Premiere, Resolve, and Final Cut, we've had it. We've had issues in the last 2 years with a non-standard file working while we were working with it and not working on the render. And some of them have been near catastrophic because they're tied deeply into an edit, and then we can't actually do it. So I would highly recommend not doing that. Conform your footage, regardless of what the marketing people at these companies tell you to do. Go ahead, Roscoe. Mitchell. I'm sorry, Mitchell.
Oh, go ahead, Mitchell.
No problem. Forgive me for speaking about the blindingly obvious, but make sure your software is up to date. In the beginning, there were some issues with M1 not being optimized with some Adobe products and maybe even Apple products, although they do much better testing. Just make sure you got the most recent version, everything's clean on your system, because I do edit on an M1 and I love it. It's right there power-wise, almost with the Power Mac.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
A quick warning though, do not upgrade during projects. Make sure that whatever you start on, you stay on during the project. But my only comment was going to be friends, do not let friends mix formats.
Yes, exactly. All right, next question.
Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany. I had to add a Mac Mini to my Windows PC setup. I don't want to work with 2 different keyboards and mouses. Recommendations and how to transfer files between both systems.
Go ahead, Jason.
So Eric, what you need is a KVM switch, which is keyboard, video, mouse, and you can get those any number of places. There are many higher-end IP-based solutions. If you're looking for something just, Mac Mini range and very simple, I would say go to monoprice.com and see what they've got. It's a pretty simple way to just get around. Oh, and I'm sorry, transferring files between both systems. SMB is server message block. That is the way that Windows does any sort of network level transport protocol. And I don't like the protocol. It's had some issues in the past, but macOS will absolutely connect to it on your work group and allow you to transfer files over your network.
Go ahead, Roscoe. I'm sorry. Sorry, I got myself all.
No, that was me muted. Sorry.
Yeah.
VNC or using some sort of where you can see the other PC remotely will allow you. You can use Chrome desktop remote, that kind of stuff. So you can actually just control the PC, even though it's sitting right next to you. You do it virtually on one screen. Is one way to do it. The keyboard and everything is connected. Not all commands translate. And then exFAT is the default file format that works both Mac and PC.
Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah, look into a piece of software called Synergy. I think it's called it says Synergy One Pro. It's a keyboard and mouse sharing app. So basically, I have 2 laptops side by side and 2 monitors.
How does it know which one, where it is? How do you?
So you basically run a server on one of the laptops, generally on the one with the keyboard and mouse, I believe, and then clients on any other computer. And in the server, you can, as clients connect to it, you just it's kind of like in Windows where you
just drag it around.
Yeah, you just drag the monitors around. It's a very solid app. I use it a lot, and it works really well.
And Jason, you can take your hand down and put it back up again in the back end. Go ahead, Tuomo.
Yeah, second vote for Synergy. That is super cool and super quick to use. Another one just for quick file transfers between PCs is an online app called ShareDrop.io. Super cool. It's just like an AirDrop on a Mac. So you can have just 2 browsers on two different PCs, and you can just drop files onto it. Super handy.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Another thing I'll do for file transfers is I'll put a share drive onto my router, and then I'll put the files onto the share drive, and then go back and forth. But NDI has the KVM option in their studio monitor. You just call it up, you go into KVM mode, and then you can control the Mac from that PC.
Go ahead, Jason.
I adore Synergy, and personally, I've used it in many previous iterations of my own studio. Anytime I have to bring any computer into a secure location, the way that it makes you tap into your system is my immediate hesitation. But yeah, it's a great app.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
You already called Nope, I didn't re-raise.
Did you already? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. We tested Keynote as a second camera in a Zoom screen share in After Hours last night and had very clear HD results. Would this work on non-HD accounts to get HD?
Go ahead, David.
It would, to a certain extent, because when you screen share, Zoom bumps up the quality, but you do suffer in frame rate.
Yeah, this is where we get into the need for virtual camera. Like this is where we need to be able to hand that off more correctly, but the screen share will probably not work well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, many live broadcasts audio professionals use Waves SoundGrid technology for plug-in processing along with audio transport. Unfortunately, it depends on an outbound DSP server, and there is no hitless failover. What would be your backup strategy?
The one thing I'll say is that I know that they may market it that way, but when it comes to using SoundGrid technology as plugins, I've actually never seen it in broadcast. So just as an aside, I mean, maybe audio broadcast is something different, but I've literally, I've done, and the experience, was not incredible. Like there was, so I mean, we've heard about it being done, and we're told that it's done by a lot of people. We just don't see it very often. So I don't know what the backup is, because the backup so far for us has been not to, and both times that we used it, it was the thing that created the most upset for us, so it basically, we've kind of, and we've heard this from other people, is that when someone is using this technology specifically, that there's always a 2-hour something in the middle of the show where the person running Waves can't figure out why the stuff isn't going from here to there, and there's something in the back end. And so that's been a handful of experience and an experience of a larger number of people that I know, and we haven't seen it used very heavily in a live environment as a result. Next question. Oh, Jason. I'm sorry, Jason, before you go.
I just wanted to back you up. I too have been, been in broadcast for a long time, and despite what they say, it's not that they're bad plugins, it's that their live implementation is just not a thing. Like, it works great in post. I've used their plugins, but not in anything live ever.
Yeah, so that's been the thing, is that we understand the marketing of it. I just haven't actually seen it in the wild very often, and every time I have, it's been a stressful experience for me. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, sorry, jumping in late. I lost power for a few minutes there. Yeah, in terms of running Waves live, they really work so much better if they run natively on the actual mixer's engine, as opposed to running SoundGrid server, which is sort of a way to get Waves to work with a live console. But it's not the best implementation of it. It's in that scenario, it's essentially running as software plugin, even though it is on separate DSP hardware DSP. You're kind of patching it. It's what do you call this? You're jerry rigging something kind of.
Yeah. Let's go to the last question for the first hour.
Marty Atias in Maryland asks, with a 720p Zoom account, would there be a performance benefit to configure screen share monitors and the camera switcher output for 720 versus 1080?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I was trying to look up ABC. They're the only people that I know that do broadcast in 720. I don't think there's that many 720p advantages at all. I think everything's being built for 1080, so I think that just stay at 1080. And there's going to be some sort of scaling involved if you're going through a 1080 switcher trying to get down to 720p. But I don't think you're going to get enough benefit to be worth your while. And I think you're going to want 1080 for the majority of people anyways.
Yeah, I think that it's the only thing about the switchers. Also, if you're going to do a record, you may want the 1080p later, as opposed to burning into the 720. So so I think that's good question though. Let's jump into the. We're now going to change gears to our second hour and talk about graphics. So we're going to talk about the Sunday Night Football. I've got a bunch of stuff edited together. My edit crashed right before I was hitting right before the top of the last hour. So if I was a little distracted today or during this first hour, it was because I re-edited the whole thing and put it all back together and exported it while we were talking. So I apologize for being a little bit. I dumped it by accident, and so hopefully all the pieces are still there, because I was kind of like, oh no. So anyway, so we're going to jump into the second. I personally think that, especially I was watching it a lot last night, Steelers were on, and I really think that this is one of the best graphics packages, out there right now. And so I thought that it would be fun for us to just kind of walk through it. This is, and just talk about what they're doing, and just really learn from it. We'll start with the first 3 questions that are already up, or the first 4 questions, and then we're going to jump right into, we won't ask any more questions. We'll jump in and kind of piece through it a little bit, and then we'll go back to questions. And so let's go ahead and ask the first question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, what software on macOS would you recommend for an audio-first person, me, to effectively build quality graphics for digital-first events? Mimo Live is my streaming software of choice.
Go ahead, Jason.
Just so you know, I am slightly biased on the matter, but I think that audio-first people make the best broadcasters. Not just that by itself is straight away, but Here to Record Graphics is a fantastic engine, and will really let you do what you need to do. I would get a little bit of hardware in there just because it's much easier to key, but it's easy and it's fast and it's almost free.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I kind of read ahead to the next question. I apologize, but Adobe, Affinity Photo, Affinity Designer are kind of the in-depth ones. That I would say it's worth learning, but then there's all kinds of templates for Keynote. So I'd really say Keynote is, if you just want good graphics, look at layouts for Keynote. Start there, but move yourself to the more advanced as soon as you can.
Yeah, and I would say that if you're building stuff on your own and you're trying to export those things out, Keynote, to Roscoe's point, I think is a great one. Here to Record is a lot of stuff already done for you. Keynote lets you put a lot of the stuff together. Remember that Keynote will export 4444 with an alpha channel, so you can actually build graphics in Keynote and export them out with alphas. So that is a doable thing on that end. And then the next step up from there, I would say, is Motion. So Motion is $50 and it does a lot. And so you're able to get a lot of quality out of it. You can even bring in 3D models, which I've been doing a lot of recently. And then after that, you start talking about doing them in Cinema 4D and Resolve and After Effects. So that becomes another layer before you reach the next level, which would be stuff like Expression and VizRT and stuff like that. But you probably don't need that for an audio first podcast, but wouldn't it be great? Have VizRT for your podcast. Anyway, so all right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, would Pixelmator Pro be an acceptable alternative to Adobe Photoshop on macOS for those not comfortable with subscription for software?
Go ahead, Jason.
Yes, 90% of what you do, the short answer is yes. It works beautifully. Works beautifully on the iPad, works beautifully on macOS. So yeah, unless you're doing something really tricky, I would say yes.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I've even used GIMP on a system, and so there's some even free software out there that works perfectly good just to do basic editing. But then I would go back to, if you don't like the subscription model, to the Affinity products, the Affinity Photo and Affinity Design.
Stuart, real quick.
Just a note on the package that Roscoe just suggested, which is GIMP. The learning curve on that is very, very steep. It is amazingly powerful, but it is not easy to use. So
it's still around.
Try one of the freeware ones.
Oh, it's still around.
Okay. I haven't heard of GIMP for like a decade. Tuomo?
Try photop.com. Photop.com. It's like Photoshop in a browser. That's super cool. Super, super cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And free.
I use Photoshop when I need to use alpha channels, because the alpha channels aren't displayed very well in Affinity Photo and Pixelmator, but then I use Affinity for 90% of the stuff that I do. Last question that we're going to do before we jump into the graphics themselves.
Our question comes from Douglas Carmichael. Would pre-built graphics packages targeted to the pre-gaming Let's try that again. Would pre-built graphic packages targeted to the game streaming market like these, and he includes a link, be a useful starting point for those without design skills?
Go ahead, Tuomo.
For learning and inspiration, yes, but for production, no. Because if you use those in production, then your competition might be using the same assets as well. And there's another sort of like a challenge which comes with that you start to cherry pick templates from different packages, and the overall experience is not going to be a very good one if you have different styles in a package.
And to tie that into what we're about to do, what I highly recommend doing is watching other people's graphics packages. So, the design principles are relatively straightforward. I mean, obviously there's incredible designers, but you can get a master's course on design by just simply taking great designs that are out there and breaking them down frame by frame, looking at what they're doing. The way I got into graphics in the 90s, broadcast graphics, was that I would literally take HBO at the time, and a couple other ABC and a couple other ones and I would rebuild their graphics, like literally rebuild them all from scratch. I never showed them to anyone. I never used them for anything. I just did it because I understand what they did there. And I would look at mine and then look at theirs and look at mine, and mine wouldn't be as good as theirs. And I'd be like, what is it about mine that, there's not enough geometry here, or this doesn't spin quite right, or this doesn't. And I would literally pixel for pixel try to reproduce what I saw there. And that may seem like a real odd thing to do, but I didn't go to college for it. This is how I learned how they did it. Now, over time, I started to develop, because I looked at it so much, I started to develop a lot of opinions about it, and I started to understand why they were doing the thing that they were doing and what they were doing there. But I would, if you have time and you have the effort, you can either go to school for it, or you can just look at a lot of what other people do and really dig into it. And the reason that what I'm going to show you now is the reason that I own a subscription to tv.youtube.com is because you can open it in a browser and hit record, screen record, and just go through and grab all the graphics that you want. And then that's what I did here. What I'm about to show you is that I just go through, and I couldn't find, the one thing is I couldn't find the one graphic that I like the most, which is the things going up behind it's somewhere in that broadcast, because I saw it in the broadcast, but I couldn't find it when I was skipping through it. But on YouTube, you can just screen grab it all. And then you're able to now, I cut those up. Like you'll see when we talk about super sources on Wednesday, you'll see a whole bunch of super sources from a whole bunch of different shows, because I have all those shows on record. Every single show, I don't have to think about it. Every show that has a live broadcast, I have it on record on YouTube. And then I just go through and just grab all the graphics, and put them in a collection. And then we can go through them. So I would highly recommend, if you're trying to learn how to do this, it's less about templates and learning about how to build those in whatever app you want to build them in Motion or Keynote. I am going to try to build the one that I'm not going to show you today because I couldn't find it in the broadcast. I'm actually going to try to build that in Motion just to see if I can do it. Like I was just like, I wonder if I could build the whole thing, the whole effect in Motion. And so we'll see if I can pull it off. Go ahead, Doug, and then we'll jump into them.
Yeah, exactly what Alex just said. But I won't say it as good as he does, but that's what I study graphics. I study what ESPN is doing, what CBS is doing, what NFL is doing. Like they are great teachers, even if no one's teaching you. But as long as you're doing it, I mean, you go frame by frame and watch what the graphics do. Watch the score bug, the way the score bug comes in. Yeah. I mean, people spend days doing that, weeks, and so to between seasons,
all of it.
Yeah. And it for me, it's fun too. I mean, like, man, like, that graphic is awesome. Like, yeah, how am I going to do that? And yeah, by doing it and doing it yourself, I mean, you can really, really teach yourself a lot just by studying.
So we're going to go ahead and jump into some of the graphics, and we'll just kind of walk through them. I'm just going to kind of skip through them in quick time. We'll talk about them. If people, for the host, just raise your, this is one thing we don't really have a place for, is how to raise your hand when we don't have a question. We'll work on that. But just raise your physical hand. This is one of the few times we'll do that. So let me go ahead and cut to, here's the first little bit of this. This isn't what I'm talking about here, but if we look at, so let's look at this transition here. So we'll hit it. Now that's a play out, but what you want to look at here, if we back up, is the elements that are coming in. This isn't like a simple, this isn't just playing it out. So here you have the fade in of that process. I got to figure out how I have to be able to see.
It's like a 4-way stinger. That's amazing.
Yeah, hold on. To be able to see it's a little hard for me to see all of you. Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah, while you're doing that, what you'll see is it's not just a fade in; it's actually a keyed element that's coming in there. So that's a key and a fill situation where that video, the entire video, is coming in as a key on top of those camera shots.
Yeah, so
they do that for the entrance and the exit. So at the end of that video, when it flies away, you'll see that it's also keyed on top of the camera that they come out to.
Right. Yeah, and that is the that's why when you start talking about generating your graphics in 444 and being able to deliver those with alphas, those are the things that you want to kind of pay attention to, is that you can't just fade it in. It is got to be, and you'll see a lot of the graphics that we see here are using those alpha channels to make that possible. So as you kind of go through it, and for some reason now, am I a co-host? Because I need to. We should try to leave it while we're doing this. We should leave. Are you guys all still in full screen? I went to gallery. Don't try to switch back and forth, because you keep, if you change the format again, just leave it on the screen while we're talking, and I can see everybody, but if it switches back and forth, I suddenly can't see the gallery. So this is super annoying. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, usually what happens in a lot of these graphics is that they're obviously pre-built, but what our company has done is to go out to the local basketball chapter and
Right.
hockey team, and we shoot the hero shots with the talent,
Right.
and then bring it back into After Effects and layer it all in, and that's where we add all these nice little juicy layers that are happening there. And also we plan for it to be part of a bumper or to lead in and lead out, as you're showing on the screen right now, with some alpha transparency, so that we make, and in some cases it might zoom into a segment or a piece of a graphic element, and that becomes the gadget that allows us to get into the next part.
Yep. Yeah. So the one thing you want to look at also is that a lot of the elements themselves are not that complicated. So you see these kind of vertical elements that are in here. So these are just, oftentimes these are like little squares, like that are there, that are being layered in, and they're soft. They're not necessarily hard. There's a lot of that where I see a lot of where it's been kind of softened up, and then you have lens flares, you have the logo flying in here, and you'll see how and this is the kind of stuff you start paying attention to. See how they're using the outline of the logo here. And then those squares have become more, and you'll notice that little things like this is like little flares off of the specular highlights that are going across here. So they're flaring. There's a lot of flaring inside of this, where a lot of their graphics have flares. So but this is like, flared highlights up here as well. That there, and then look at how within this graphic, you can see one of the things they use a lot of is kind of this particle reveal of the text, and you'll see that in a couple different places. And then, you want to really examine, like, so for instance, when I'm looking at these graphics, I'm examining as they extrude this out, there's a couple different pieces of geometry here. This isn't just a rounded front end, right? So you're having, this is coming up. This front corner has been created as a separate object with separate surfaces. It then rolls down into this area here, which has its own texture map, and that texture map is what's being, revealed there. So these are very, much more complex text as we kind of work through it. Go ahead, Tuomo.
If you could go back a few frames so that we can see the guys before we transition into the full screen graphic. So I would like you to pay attention to the flare, how it comes on here, because it's just not an alpha blending. So it is not just a key on top of a video. This is actually, it has an additive.
Well, I think this feels additive, but I think that it actually, from a mechanical perspective, it has to be I don't think it.
Either there are two ways how to do it live as an additive blending as well. So if you would have actually a graphics box there to introduce the flare, then it could be an additive one. But it can be a clever alpha as well. I
think it's a clever alpha in this case. For most of the live switchers, we can't. Most hardware switchers, we can't do anything other than alpha. In that process. Let's jump to let's go through, and you'll see here. See how this glow here that comes through. It kind of it's boom, boom, boom going down below it. So it's here, 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 and again, these are all and look at. Again, these are simple graphics behind them, these kind of mechanical graphics, but you'll see that they didn't highlight everything. They highlighted those thick areas there, then there, then there. And all of this stuff, you want to kind of break through, all of those bits and pieces. And then, of course, you have this here. I still don't think that the green screen keys are as good as they could be, but we won't. We won't get into that. A lot of flaring, through here. Go ahead, and we'll keep our comments pretty quick. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, real quick. The trend nowadays, of course, is the multi-layered look, resolving into a 3D graphic. It seems to be 3Ds are big, so mixing the 3D with flat layered graphics is the big thing. And if you watch what's happening in every case, everything is building up to the next thing that's going to be shown as a Euro shot. Right. So if there's layered graphics, they're all supporting something that's coming later.
Right. Go ahead, Jason, real quick.
Also, the light leaks, if you notice, as it goes, the Steelers light leaks, the flares go in as yellow. The light leak on that, I believe it was a Singer, was purple. So each one of these is actually tailor-made, and that hexagonal reveal on the SNF at the very beginning, gorgeous. Yeah.
And then here you have, this is just a pre-built graphic. I don't think this is, it's playing out, but I don't think it's, any kind of live render. But the, and I don't know what these are rendered in. I can tell you that Cinema 4D has kind of cornered this market, from, is that so for the most part, everybody that I know is at this point is using all these motion graphics are all being done in Cinema 4D. So when you look at these pieces here, the thing to look at here is this looks, and this is a great one. This is like if someone said, I want to know how to do broadcast graphics, I would say, here, take this 3D logo and make it. like literally, in the old days, there was a masterpiece would be something. It was, what they would do is the watchmaker, their masterpiece, they get a block of metal and they'd make a watch out of it, make a clock out of it, and they'd have to put all those pieces into to make it work. And if you wanted to do a masterpiece, for broadcast graphics, I would say that this logo is something you see only for a couple seconds in the game. But as a 3D person who does broadcast graphics, there is so much going on. So look at the textures going along. So there's metal, scuffs and process all along here. This isn't just smooth. This has got it's got history to it. It's got, pieces of it here. There's a subtle curve in this curve here. And of course, these are sticking out. This is all a 3D graphic with a great glow and a subtle background there. And then you have little details in these corners to make it feel more physical. So the textures here that break up that chrome, and that texture is affecting the specular highlights as well as the reflectivity, as well as a lot of other things that are there. And then you'll look at how these are all kind of blended in, and how they've done a lot of work to make it feel. It's both very clean graphic as well as very physical feeling, because of all the little bits and pieces, all the little details that they're putting on it. But it is literally, if you wanted to learn how to do 3D graphics, the first thing I would do is just say, here, take this logo, reproduce it perfectly, and play them back right next to it. And if you were done with that, I'm pretty clear that I could hire you to do computer graphics, for me, to do 3D computer graphics for me, because there's just a lot. I mean, it's like, even like the NBC here is tilted just a little bit, towards you. Everything's kind of faced forward to you. It's not like it's just a flat plane. And all of this is over a curved surface, which, by the way, reflects better, as you go through it. So it works better. Go ahead, Mitch, real quick.
And if Cinema 4D scares you in the beginning, because it is a deep curve, learning curve, inside of After Effects, you can use a program called Element 3D, which is made by Video Copilot, which will take OBS and other objects that are made, and you can get into it pretty quickly, pretty easily, once you've learned the After Effects interface.
Yeah, and I would...
That's speaking to somebody that's used After Effects since it was called COSA.
And I have too. I will say that if I was going to do 3D today, I'd probably use Motion, because it's the 3D engine inside of Motion's a lot better. Like it's just a lot more fluid. I'm able to throw a lot more textures and maps, and it's just a more modern rendering engine at the moment. This is Pittsburgh, in case you're wondering, my favorite city. Anyway, so one of the things that I just want to show here is that, here's a nice little time lapse that I'm sure was shot sometime near the time of the game, maybe a couple days before or whatever. So a couple things about this is that these are long exposure. So this is a long exposure time lapse. So it's not, so that the length of these makes a difference as far as how that looks. So you want to look at that. Time lapses, when I load in, I have GoPros or phones or other things, and I shoot time lapses all the time, or SLRs, and I shoot time lapses all the time. They are the cheapest, like, eye candy ever. Like, you just throw them up somewhere and you show the field getting built. You show cars going by. You show people going by. One of the things that I do is I tend to shoot mine in video, because, to go back to After Effects, what Mitchell was just talking about, After Effects has an echo system that is really powerful. So if you take video instead of time lapse, what you can actually do is rebuild all the motion blur across that using time echo inside of, and it only works in After Effects, doesn't work in Motion. And in After Effects, you can stretch that out so you can get these incredibly, like, ethereal things of people and cars and everything else out of it, because you're using 30 frames per frame, or 30 to do that. So things that I'm paying attention to here are just really nice. Again, look at the subtle details that are along. This is just a super source, that's there. But this is corner pinned. Like, is it corner? I don't know, but it could be corner pinned, for the videos here. But the bottom line is look at the graphic here. Is all these little subtle details of it's not a perfect graphic here. It's lots of little dots. Small details create scale. So when you see little details that are sitting there across that, they create the appearance of scale in your graphics. Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah, and you can also see the subtle reflection on the bottom too.
Yeah.
So there's a video plane that's actually kind of inverted and laid down like that. So it's pretty.
Yeah, that's still again using that alpha channel.
Graphic.
Yeah, it's not, and then also the things to start paying attention to also is when you look at this here, that texture, textures that are similar to this are hidden down in here. This isn't just black. This isn't, there's a detail that's hidden in here that again creates scale and importance and to the graphic. And these are, and this can be done, admittedly, like a lot of this stuff can be done in cinema, but it can also be done in a good Photoshop artist, or Affinity artist, whatever, can build those as 2D graphics if you just know what you're doing as far as shading and highlights and so on and so forth. Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah, so what you're seeing here is the layering. So you have, obviously that's just the beauty cam, the live beauty cam in the background, and then you've got the three cameras that are DV'd in such a way that they fit inside the Chiron that's sitting on top of those. It's providing the borders and the, so there's one layer of Chiron sitting on top, providing the borders and the font. Right. And then he's also got the DV in such a way that it creates that reflection.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really great. This, I think, I'll show this a couple times, but we've come a long way. So, when you look at this, they're frozen here and they're showing the amount of work in my head that it takes for you to be able to figure out who this person is, show it for a replay that all happens within 25 seconds. Like, I just want to point out that that's a lot of work. Like when I look at that, I'm just like, and then it disappears and then it immediately cuts to, that process. Now here's another, here is a, let's see here, let me. So one of the other things about it is, see that where it goes almost all to white? So we use this in visual effects a lot as well. It creates impact. So a big white frame or nearly white frame will create the feel of an impact. And the more frames you put before and after it, make it softer or harder as far as the impact. I mean, we've done ones where we just go all white into one frame, just whack, but that's a really hard hit for the viewer. And so you can see here that it's just a quick, that's just a big flash. And then these they're using these outlines. Really interesting use of.
Yeah, and the white flash also gives you a cut point for the TV to, that's
your
what
alpha.
The switcher's doing its cut.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, you have to. One thing with sweepers is you do want to find there's got to be a frame somewhere that is it's all graphic. The sweeper's not nearly as effective without one that it's all graphic. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I begin to wonder, because I haven't done live TV in a while, but I do a lot of graphics for it as packages. How much of this is being done live and how much is rolling in graphics that are driven by a back-end database or program? Because you just mentioned, how can you get number 33 up there so quickly? It's got to be a piece of software that's driving it.
It's done. Go ahead, Bo.
It's a really talented person who's very familiar with the producer and where they're going to go with the replays. So it's literally somebody following along on a telestrator in the truck. That's number 33 made the tackle there. We're probably going to go to his replay. So it's a bang bang process. It's very fast and generally there might be one or two reaction shots after a play, but this is a very replay heavy show. And they try to tell the story in such a way that you understand it, and that's what that telestrator is trying to do.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, and just traditionally they're using a cross dissolve or they're whiting out using the dip to color to transition between real time and replay. That's the other thing I've noticed they do a lot. Yeah,
so the sweeper, that is the sweeper, that's the sweeper transition is used for, I think, almost every time we're jumping from one place to another. Go ahead, Tuomo.
I would say all of the graphics there are real time, so there are no pre-rendered elements. Everything is done in real time in the 3D real time engines.
I think these are actually 2D renders that are then being comped over it. There are some 3D stuff in here, which we'll get to, but I think that these are actually, they're 3D, but this doesn't need to be 3D rendered. It'd actually be really hard to do that level of compositing in the 3D engines today. You can, again, there's things that you can do with it, track it in 3D and so on and so forth, but almost all of this is just, it is a 3D render. Now, this is also stuff that we can now do even in, again, this kind of thing with text is stuff that we can easily do in things like Cinema 4D in Motion and After Effects, as well. Let's go ahead.
And stats at the bottom, like in that lower third there, that was probably generated partly by a back-end system.
Yeah.
And partly by somebody that's typing real fast on the Chiron and make it happen. But they don't use Chiron anymore. It's just a word that's hung over.
They do. This is all Chiron. So this is all Chiron. Chiron's grown a lot. Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah, so what you'll have here is there is a stats system. So there's stats people that are keeping the stats, that are entering everything into the stats system. So that's coming across XML or CII is kind of Chiron Intelligent Interface or something like that. And then basically the bug operator has templates for this player versus this player. This player's this might be a punter kicker kind of thing, or a kicker receiver kind of thing. So you have the pre-built templates, and then the computer is just throwing the right people into those templates, based on the matchup at the time.
Right. So no one has to type anything in, but you have everything is dynamically generated, but it still has to be activated by somebody and saying, grab this, grab this, grab this. In the same way that with a lot of what we're doing with Office Hours 2.0, we're going to be grabbing a whole lot of stuff that's kind of running through it. But even like who that person is, that's obviously connected to the data that is going to kind of fly through. The graphic system says I need this, 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 and this, and then I'm going to put that all together. Let's go ahead to the next. And by the way, when you look at all of these things, incredible amount of data. Very well designed. This is what I love about watching, football in general, but this graphics package is that the text is just, well designed. They're giving you an enormous amount of heads up information about what you're looking at so that you understand where you are in the game. And, we've watched this progress over the last 30 years of it just getting, from simple time frames to just lots of data. And watch that lower third and how it changes. It changes its format all the time. Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say this. So this particular graphics package has the benefit of kind of being a couple years old. They typically introduce new graphics package for inserts and bugs like this during the Super Bowl year. So usually Super Bowl is when each network will kind of debut their new bug look. So NBC's last Super Bowl was 2018. So this one has grown, the last several years and kind of morphed into what it is now. So, it's
really mature package.
Pretty impressive. Yep.
Yeah. Jason.
Well, and with respect to the way that it's rounded and the graphics that are in here, I'm blown away by the way that they're really getting good at figuring out exactly how much rounding of the corners looks great at 4K and great at 1080 and great at 720. And the depth that is there, that faux depth is just gorgeous. And also the highlights, you could immediately see the Seahawks, Freddie Swain, right? And that tiny little, that green highlight, but also the logo right behind him. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, there's so much going on, and I think that's the thing that's important is to really think about when we look at that, and I think that we're somehow still. I just want to make sure that Mickey knows this. And if we change state from that video, it means I have to do a whole bunch of things on my end. Anyway, so Are we full screen to the? I guess people can tell us. Are we full screen to the viewers?
Yes. Well,
okay, because I keep on going back to the gallery. I don't usually talk about behind the scenes, but I keep on going back to the gallery every time it changes out of Spotlight and back into Spotlight. I have to do it again because I can't see anybody. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Bo. So, Bo, when they commit to that Super Bowl moment, are they asking every truck vendor to then change out their graphics package to support them? Or are they doing that themselves? Or are they bringing some little separate trailer with all the graphic stuff in it?
So this show runs on the same trucks all year. So it's, this show runs on a Indy 1 is the their NEP trucks, and Indy 1 is the fleet. So there's 4 production trailers, an office trailer, and a couple other support trucks. But so these same trucks are at every single Sunday night football game. So yeah, it's easy to change out the graphics package just for that unit.
So they only change it to this night's trucks. They don't worry about the Sunday morning trucks also, or did they try to do them all?
So this show in particular is the NBC football show, and or NBC, and it's NBC's only show. So for instance, like NFL and CBS or some of the other networks that have multiple games, they would change those out on all those units as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
And then here again watch the there's a lot, and again, the thing that's always interesting is that a lot of these are very simple, this transition here. Now this is all happening live. So you have the lower third making way, not just being covered, but like fading out and making way for that. But when you see this graphic coming across, it looks great. You've got a highlight, but nothing that it's the design that makes the difference, because there's nothing you can't do. These are just little squares that are little rectangles that are being shot across as a particle system. But then again, as you look at this, you want to look at things like the the texture that you see underneath the texture on top of the Seahawk logo, the subtle highlights and textures that really give it dimension. So that highlight on the underneath the player that's highlighting the lower third and separating the player it's kind of a lit thing that kind of goes across the whole lower third. And so you see this kind of drop off, and it's just a really, well-designed process. Now this one is really interesting. I'll just show this for a second, then we'll jump to you, Tuomo. But you can see that they're kind of using lens flares. It's okay, now we're making, we're using something to just kind of tell you we're switching between it. And again, remember, all of these graphics have to be fired and figured out and sorted out within the 25 seconds. So these are all pre-built, as something that you're going to fire out, but it has to be done. Go ahead, Tuomo, and then Bo.
Yeah, when you are preparing these kind of real-time graphics for sports, you are always just playing around with single keyframes, just nudge there, nudge back 2 frames, and it's really, really precise, because they are so quick, and it makes a huge difference if you just make a 2-frame change to anything.
Yeah, good, Bo.
Yeah, so 2 things. One, the transition from the bug to those are completely different machines. So, there was no coordinated transition. It's just the graphics are built in such a way that they work together. The other thing, for the starting lineup, so these are edited just before the game starts, because usually they don't get starting lineups in until maybe 100 minutes out. And these are built in such a way that at runtime, the technical director can put the players' heads on either the left side of the name or the right side. And they typically do that so that when they're showing the high 50 shot, the players' heads are behind the offense. So it's literally built in such a way that the players' heads can be DV'd on the left or the right at the moment of playing it.
I will say that while I love the graphics, the player video is never quite as good as it could be. That's my only one little critique. It's always like a little low contrast, not quite. It's like it looks like a camera light. Like right on them. And there's other places where we see this incredible lighting on the characters, and I'm just like, you can just set that up in the room that they come through to do this.
Some team facilities are better than others.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mitchell, real quick.
I just actually a question for Bo, since you got some hands-on experience there. Do they set the camera moves up and the positioning and compositing of the shot to accommodate the graphics sometimes for some of the bumper shots there from the live camera moves?
Yeah, absolutely. The camera guys the camera people all have return. So they're seeing, they can hit a return button on their camera and see the actual live video with their graphics on top. This crew, has been together for so long that they know what all the graphics are and how to account for them.
So that he could be saying, go to bumper 5, camera 3, take, and he knows that he's going to cheat it a little bit right because they're going into a commercial break, that graphic is going to look better coming out of that spot.
Yeah, so the traffic here would be, Seattle defense left, and the camera people know how to account for the heads on the left.
Yeah, go ahead, Liberty.
And when you were speaking about the headshots, now the NFL probably has much bigger budget than the WNBA, but when we did some work with the Dream, you really have, it's like media day to get that like green screen shot, and they're rotating through. So just some context too for some people on how that happens.
But I've done.
They have a
these.
bigger budget though, so I'm just going to say
with very little budget, we set up a good green screen. It was just a matter of having the lighting. It didn't take us any longer. It was just the lighting was better set up. So when they walked through it, it was set up better. And there's some facilities that we work at that have great little rooms to do this in, as Bo said, and some facilities that we work with that don't. So and it's always a little bit of a bummer.
Most of the time when we're doing the hero shots, we only have the guys for like 5 seconds. We don't have time to.
Yeah, it's not time. It's not time. It's setup. Like it's not the player time that's the problem. It's the setup time. So when you get those lights right, you just got to get the lights set up quickly, because the quality of the video is not how long you have the players. It's how well you set up the kit so they can walk through and say it. This is a lot of them for NFL and especially college look like it was an intern. Go ahead. That did that. Anyway, let's jump through this. We're running out of time. So here's another thing. Again, as you look at this transition here, is how much is going on, and also little ease in, ease outs of that process. So as it flies through, you can see all of these, and all these little sections here are basically coming in independently, and all of that creates a nice little. It just creates this nice little delivery, of that. And again, this is the reason I'm showing it is just that it's a master's course in how to think about design and think about that process. Let's jump to the next thing here. We're going to go through a little bit of this quickly so we can get to some of the questions, but here's another great little lower third that's new to itself, and then it goes to the next one. Here's that build out transition that we kind of saw before. So again, this is how I look at these is I look at, okay, so what do they do here? So we have the outline with the alpha channel, and we're starting to build that alpha channel with that highlight. And then we start building out those alpha channels that are basically feeding that all through. And we never actually get to a whole logo. Like we give you the impression of that logo, as we make that transition. But it's a really complex one. And here's another one of these. Like this is a replay that they had like seconds to get to. And we've got, the nice little headshot, and then we show that. Another nice, one of the things to also think about when we look at super sources, we'll talk about this, is this nice soft edge here. This is really like, it's a little out of focus. It's kind of moving in the background there. So these are these kind of planes that are going there. It's just very, and with a little texture on it. It's very nice. And but you want to, again, break down and look at all of those things. And then, of course, this is obviously well designed. This is where we see when you have time to design it all. This is all very well designed and how it locks into that lower third that you see there. There's and this is yet another version of this. So look at how it comes out, and then it rolls up, and then allows for that graphic to come through, and it's still just moving ever so slightly towards the end. There's still life to that. It's not just like I open it up and I just hang out. I'm just paying attention to it a little bit, and then I fade out. There's another one there. This one's kind of funny. This is the we don't have, in my opinion, this is kind of the hold on. Very nice display. Sorry. Button again the wrong way. So this is very nice display, but this is kind of the other sponsors. We need a window that we can DVE into that is So it's very nice around it. Now look at this. This is the kind of stuff that you pay attention to with graphics, though. You see how this rolls up, but it rolls up and it never goes over that edge. See that corner there? It's never going over that corner, because if it went over that corner, you'd have to comp this over top of that video as opposed to under it. So you can't drop this video down on top of this. If this and I guarantee they made sure that this rolled up but never touched the edge that it's sitting there. Now it may be comped over it, but you don't want to take that option away. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Too much white space on those last 3 graphics rolling in. Way too much. They're wasting a lot of area.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of discussion about that usually, about how much white space there that you want to have. That it really focuses you on the logo too, so it'll feel pretty crowded if you get much bigger than that. Inside of that. This is see, now I think that this is the lighting that should look like all the time. So although I'd probably light them a little bit from ahead, this is but this is great lighting. For this. Now this is here you see this transition, and these are 3D objects applied to motion, applied to particle systems. Probably not. They're probably all hand animated, but the really great design. Notice the kind of the use of the colors, the use of depth with the and lots of little details like these little highlights that are down here and going across it. That's there is just a really well designed process there. Great little transition there. And here is, now this is, I believe, 3D graphics. So these are tracked. These are actually tracked into the exterior shot. So you can see that they're actually, they're doing a camera move. So that's a 3D composite. So to your point, it can be done, and it there you can see it being used with those graphics being fed in. Go ahead, Jason.
The part that I really like about that one is if you hit play, you'll notice that there are subtle light changes, and you can even see people moving just a little bit in front of the stadium, or in the windows in the stadium. That's live video. Well, not live, but that's replay video.
Yeah. This, by the way, is, I believe, an LED wall. And, so you can see that he's got enough hair detail up here that it's probably not a green screen. It's hard to see in this one, but in some of the other parts you can see it. So this is really hard to do well. So hard to do well on the to get the LED wall to not moray, cause all kinds of other problems. But I think this works really well as far as creating some dimension. Really, really well designed there. I don't know what I did there. I thought this was kind of interesting. It's kind of a fun little, I think we'll see more of this, like explaining things with some kind of graphics. It's kind of a fun industrial. I will say, I do believe that this is generated in real-time 3D. I don't know if we know or not, but it is. The only reason I say that is that, and it could be just that I'm capturing from a...
These are generally edited,
They are.
Yeah, these are generally edited pieces.
Just feels very aliased. I don't know why. You can see it right there. It could just be the 1080i thing. But I think these are a lot of fun of like showing these and these little illustrated little pieces that you can kind of throw out. Again, the only reason I said that what I don't notice in the rest of these is this is what my eye tends to go to when I see 3D. You'll see this little aliasing that goes along these edges. And that usually, when I see that, I usually cue that I'm looking at real-time 3D as opposed to pre-rendered, because it's hard to anti-alias real-time. So, but this is it's a cool graphic though.
And just to jump back in, sorry, I just a couple of notes on some of the other things you were showing. The billboards, the sponsor elements you were seeing.
Yeah.
Those are generally done at master control. So everything other than the sponsor elements will happen in the truck on site. And then any sponsorship elements like that will happen in master control so that they can track them in their same, sponsor tracking system.
Right. And those are dynamically generated for what they, where they need to go. So again, they have to be open to be able to be comped in. This is interesting, so this is obviously, powered by AWS, completely different lower third and very well designed, but it's taking you, this is subtly taking you out of the lower third systems that we saw before. And I still think it looks, it looks really nice. And again, look at all the things that they're doing with, this is a little darker, this is a little lighter, this is, all the, and the text looks very, it's very, well designed there. Let's see here. Again, just.
Yeah, and these are, Jason, on top of an actual live camera that's configured for AR graphics right there.
And they look great. These are really.
So is that punch in tracked? I mean, I can't imagine that they're not just zooming in on a bigger frame than they have.
No, it's
all tracked. The camera is sending back tracking data, so it's all live AR.
God, it's gorgeous.
You could zoom into the N and NBC and it would zoom all the way in. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to make it harder, when I said you had to do that graphic for your master class, or if your masterpiece, look, there it is. You have to animate it too, just like that. Really, really just really fun, kind of transformer kind of, open ups, to do this. And again, this is for many of us aspirational. You have to remember that this is a huge team of people who build these graphics, that are very, very good at what they do. But it's great to kind of, if you want to, for people who have time, if you want to learn a lot, try to reproduce these and then come with questions. Like even take the 2D ones and come with questions when we do these graphics discussions. Like, I can't figure out how to do this thing. And this is a great after hours thing of we may do some labs where we do lower thirds, where we try to figure a lot of these things out. And we all try to reproduce it and work that through. But it is worth playing around with. Much better lighting here for the folks. I'm just saying. Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, I'm blown away by this because, it's the same logo, but it's animated and it flies in and flies out. And like, the NFL great, those stripes come down, like the grill of a car. And I'm wondering, like, how much of that graphic, where it folds in, how many comped elements is that? I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of copies. I'm picturing how I would do this in motion.
I mean, for a lot of this stuff, you're rendering it in passes. So what you end up doing is you end up rendering those 3D graphics you're rendering them all, a lot of them in different passes, and some of them all together because they have to, because they're interacting with each other. But then you're rendering them in passes so that you can, in your compositing package, whether it's After Effects or most of these are probably, I would guess, After Effects is a pretty popular one for this level of graphic design. But you'll have layers and layers and layers of these that are the specular highlights and the graphics and alpha channels and alpha reveals, and all those things are all built there. And then you sit there and figure out how they're going to interact with each other. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, like when we did high school football last year, I would spend an entire week before the game building all the graphics and then shooting all the graphics over to the announcers and go through them. But yeah, like the time it creates, that it takes to create these things is
right. And again, it's always you always want to pay attention to it's easy for you to only pay attention to what you're doing or what other people are doing around you. It's always good to I always try to find who the people are that I think are the best at what they do. And then I want to try to mind the gap between where I am and where they are and try to keep closing that gap. Not that I'm going to necessarily get to it, but that's helped me a lot along the way. Go ahead, Stuart.
I ask one of my questions that I put in because we probably don't have questions for time for questions.
We're gonna do a couple questions here. We'll run a little.
All these flashing graphics and what have you. Is there a set of standards that need to be followed to make sure that they don't end up causing epileptic fits? Now, I've noticed we've got lots of bright flashing lights that have scrolled backward and forward, and that can be very irritating for some people or could cause episodes. How is it done to make sure that doesn't happen to people watching?
I don't know.
with a warning at the very beginning. It's like a video game.
Yeah, I don't know what that. I don't have the answer for that. Again, another one here. This is a attracting graphic here that that you have that with a lot of really interesting, bits and pieces of that process. And again, look at all the little details here. So you look at the little highlights. So watch this logo here, and watch the highlights going across it. Like all of that gives it life and chrome and everything else. And these great little like flags dropping down that are here. You'll see it there. So it's just a really, and then it just really has a sense of real presence. And again, these graphics are the most expensive version of all of these things. This one is a mixture of that graphic that we saw before that tells you where he is, as well as a telestrator. And then they get rid of it, and then they play it out. And all of that has to happen. The coordination of that all has to happen in seconds, because this is a replay, but in a 25-second break between plays. So anyway, so I think that was about it. I think that I ran to the end there. Anyway, so cut back. Let's jump to a couple questions. Go ahead, John.
Isn't it true that this was really a ploy that you could watch your team play last night and for your wife? I'm preparing for tomorrow's show.
But no, I went into my little. So the funny thing is we were supposed to have somebody else speak today. So this was I had to figure out what to put into Monday, and I was watching this anyway last night. And I was trying to figure out what Monday was going to look like because I had just realized on Friday that Monday wasn't going to work the way I expected it to, and I was watching this and I was like, this is so good that we should just pull it all open and take a look at it, and I could literally spend all day looking at this. Maybe we'll do this in after hours at some point where we just take a 3-hour lab and we just go through this graphic frame by frame and do this. And the thing is when you pay attention to a lot of these things, when my very first day at Industrial Light and Magic, I came down, I was working at Lucasfilm before, and at Lucasfilm, it was pre-visualization and we were doing 25 shots a week. And there was just this mass chaos of low resolution game graphics, of the pod race, space battle, and battle, stuff like that. And I got to ILM, and John Knoll and Stu Mashowitz were sitting there in my new office. I shared an office with Stu, and they had taken a camera and they'd taken a little pen light, and the pen light just swung in front of the camera back and forth, a film camera, and they were looking at how an anamorphic lens, how the lens flares worked, how it flared across and everything else, and how the little lens reflections worked and everything else. And the two of them were sitting there for hours. When I first got there, I was like setting up my computer, and they're like, "You see that? Yeah. You see what it does right there? You see a little dirt that's like right there? Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And see how it's soft right here, and then it's a little sharper over here? Yeah. And all day they spent and I was like, oh, I'm really going to let my OCD run free here. So anyway, so the thing is that's what you want to do. And I think that maybe we will do this. It's probably not enough time in a second hour, but in after hours of we'll just do this until we run out of time for shows. It might be a fun lab where we just run it, I don't care how long it lasts. And we just sit there and circle things and look at things and try to figure it out, because we can learn so much, and what happens is we're training our eyes, so a lot of this is, eye training, because once you start to see it, now you start to see when it works and doesn't work, and the action of studying it makes you better at seeing it. And then the action of and being able to see it means you'll do better work, because the one thing to notice is that with most of these graphics, they're not that complicated. They're not the 3D logo the main 3D logo is complicated. The rest of it is just good design, which is hard, not just good design, but good design that we can learn and anybody can do in any graphics package. Go ahead, Tuomo.
There's one part of the sports graphics and news graphics as well done this way is a transition between a state to another. This is something which we haven't touched on yet, which means that if you have a lower third and then you want to bring in a news item or a clock or something, right, how does the other elements which you already have on screen, how do they make space for the new one? And right, when it goes out, how does it transition back to its original position? And that is one sort of like a part of the design which is super hard to do visually and technically.
Yeah, absolutely. And the let's see here. Yeah, I think that it is that's what we saw when we had that lower third, and then the other lower third came in. Is the two of them have to talk to each other? Now that was two different machines, but you could do it theoretically in, if you've got enough layers, you can have one machine do all of it. In this case, you can do it in two. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I for one would love to do a frame by frame of this. Every year on the air, I do this for the Super Bowl, but more specifically for the graphics and the commercials. And I just kind of do, Mystery Science Theater, talk over it. And I absolutely adore this stuff. And yes, the best way to learn this stuff is to just articulate it.
So now what we're going to do is we are going to do a kind of a pretty fast run through of these questions. But we'll so if I come to you to answer the question, try to keep it to 10 seconds or less. So go ahead and jump in, Liberty.
All right, we've got Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. Religion warning. While waiting to see samples from actual football, I have to wonder, do U.S. broadcasters reuse the graphic layouts for multiple sports? And does the finances of the sports bodies impact the graphics available for them?
Most of these graphics are generally built for that game or that series of games, and not reused very often. They have massive budgets to do that. So if you're in college broadcast or above, you've got graphics packages that are at least done for the league, for that broadcaster. So Fox Sports, ABC, NBC all have their own separate ones, and they're all built for football, but they're not, or American football, but they're not used for anything else, and I think that most graphics are not reused. Now, when you get into the smaller sports that aren't broadcast nationally or regionally, they have a lot of stuff that's shared graphics because they, so like Pac-10 will have its, but it's their own packages for, everything from volleyball to everything else. It's the same look, but they'll be designed specifically for that sport. They'll take a lot of the elements from each other between different systems. Go ahead, Stuart, real quick.
Yeah, I've just wondered extra. Does the sports branding look the same per broadcaster? Or if a sport is shared across multiple broadcasters, do they stick to the sports branding or the broadcaster's branding?
Broadcast. Yeah, like Fox Sports and ABC and NBC look completely different. I'm sure that there's some rules of engagement dealing with the NFL because the NFL technically owns all of it, but every broadcaster has their own package. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, would there be any open source, reasonably priced product to link graphics with databases? I've worked with PostgreSQL in the past and am not afraid of writing scripts or building software from source code.
I don't have the answer for that. I think a lot of times we figure out what the graphics package wants to see, and then we publish it in that format. Sometimes that's XML, CMS, or CSV. So, it depends on where we put it for the package to grab onto it. And usually, but from a programmer's perspective, it's just a matter of formatting data in a place that the graphics package can read. Next question.
From Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. Arrows to players, NASCAR uses GPS data to feed the graphic to keep the arrows pointing to the right car. How does the Merkin rugby derived game do it? GPS helmets?
Go ahead, Tuomo.
I would guess that in this instance, there's a guy who's sort of like an EVS operator who's using a special tool to track the picture on screen and just painting with mouse and pointing at who is this person. And it's just been painted on top of a short video clip. So it's not GPS in this instance.
Yeah, and it's you'll notice that the video is not moving when they highlight it. So when they're putting the arrow to the person, the video is frozen, and then it fades away, and then it starts to play. So every time you see that, you'll see it frozen. There's a person's little tag and an arrow, and then it shows who they are, and then they fade out and it plays out. So it's a two-part thing that allows it. I imagine that, to your point, eventually it will track, but I don't think it tracks right now. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, Roscoe suggested starting with Keynote as a simple graphic solution. How would you get video into and out of Keynote without virtual camera or output support?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I think you're thinking Keynote Live, which does have some barriers to getting live passing through Keynote. I'm actually talking about using Keynote as an authoring tool where you would generate a video with a ProRes 444, so you have the alpha channel and everything, and then you play that back using a playout B, using something that you can trigger, especially in the ATEM systems, that immediately put that graphic in when you hit that specific macro.
And the if you really wanted to use Keynote as a graphic, we used to use it as a graphics generator, and you really wanted to do that, you would need some kind of ATEM or something else to bring the video in live, and then you would need some kind of output where it's going out to a second monitor that it sees, and then it just plays out from there. And you could theoretically do that. You wouldn't have any alpha channel, so you'd have to do everything with LumaKey. And I did 100 shows, or maybe around 100 shows with that 12 years ago, before we was like, hey, I'm going to use an alpha channel for this. If I was going to if I was going to get into the fact where I was going to do live graphics and I didn't want to spend a lot of money, I'd probably talk to Tuomo or to here to record, to John Barker. Between those two, you have to decide, which one makes the most sense, but they're very cost effective. I think both Tuomo, you're going to have to, I can't keep the letters in my head.
It's just SPX now.
SPX.
It's been reduced.
Yeah, SPX. So I'll get it. I keep, so SPX is free. So, so you can download it. The hard part you get into is time. So yes, you can do it in Keynote. And if you already know Keynote, that makes sense. But you can't keyframe. You can't do, if you want to do quick little graphics, Keynote's a great place to get started. And it's a great place to just do things, and you can do it, like you can learn it in the afternoon and have it done in the evening. But if you're going to start spending real time on something, SPX is a better solution, or here to record, or those kinds of things, because they're going to scale with you, and let you keep on doing those things, and they're built for what you're trying to do. And there's just time is something. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. Why choose key fill over chroma key?
Go ahead, Jason.
Because key fill gives you perfect control. So if you look at my hand on top of the logo, it gives you perfect pixel level control over opacity without any color shift, and you can layer it on top of, many, many, many things without any issue.
Also, most switchers are 422, not 444. Almost all the switchers are 422. And that means that you're basically keying, if you do a chroma key, you're keying half the resolution. So you're actually going to tend to get, on really fine graphics and fine detail, you're going to tend to get some aliasing because of the chroma key, unless you can. What I was doing earlier with office hours, I would key at 4K and come down to 1080p. So that allows me to oversample that. But other than that, the chroma key, and it's also like what happens when it's green, when the graphics are green. So key fill is far superior when it's available. And generally, I'll use LumaKey. I only use Chroma because of that subsampling, because of the 422 subsampling. I will only use chroma key if I have to. Like if I can't get LumaKey to work, I would rather use a LumaKey than a chroma key every day, because I'll get a better graphic if I don't have to deal with pure black. Next question.
Stuart asks again, for those where key fill isn't available, what are the limits and workarounds to get the best chroma key?
Go, Jason.
I think we got a little bit to most of this in the first question, but I would say your color generator in ATEM combined with an extra DVE to do a little bit of slight color correction might do something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is you can get good green screens with it. I mean, the keyer inside of the ATEMs is really powerful. The other one that's really good, Panasonic uses a geometric keyer that works really well within theirs. And so those two are great. And then, of course, there's Ultimate and things like that you could use. The big thing is that subsampling. And so the best workaround to me is I use Luma almost all the time. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, what tool would you use to track 3D graphics with a live video source? Could Cinema 4D or similar tools map video as a texture?
That is a pretty complicated thing to do. I believe that Ross has a version of that. that's used. So, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but Ross has a live version that will take that tracked data and put and insert the graphics right into it, and maybe we'll bring them in and have them show it to us. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, would there be any way we could incorporate AR elements into Office Hours 2.0 graphics?
Given what we're doing, I don't think we would need it right now. So I think that I don't think that we'll have heads up stuff and everything else. I think that putting in that kind of graphic somewhere in the future might make sense. Also, I think ancillary content that is truly AR that's in front of you is something that we'll experiment with as we keep moving forward. It'd be great if we're talking about a new piece of hardware, if everybody watching could pull it up, in front of them and rotate it around and ask questions and look at it. Not far away. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, would it be worth it to bite the bullet on a Maxon 1 license, Cinema 4D and supporting products for one that is not mostly a 3D artist?
I think that there's a test time for Cinema 4D. I would look at it. I would make sure that you really line up time that you're going to take full advantage of it. So make sure that you can do the training, make sure that you can do all the other bits and pieces, make sure you know it before you start going into it. But it is, as a graphics package, it's the most powerful for this thing, for this process. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, would most of these graphics have been, probably, built on a PC-based system or on a Mac? I know Alex and the Rebel Mac unit made their name bringing high-end graphics down to consumer-class hardware of the day.
Go ahead, Jason.
So at this level, it doesn't actually matter. My guess is it was built by, a cluster of whatever was the cheapest, which would probably not be a Mac. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, the software that's used for this would most likely, now the playout software is another thing, but the software that was used to make most of the graphics could be on a Mac or a PC. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, what collaborative tools enable sharing 3D graphics content amongst a large team in real time? Would Zoom be bogged down with sharing 3D scenes across a network?
Yeah, absolutely. So, these 3D scenes are generally proprietary graphics by the time they reach live, because they have to be conformed into that. Now, how they get passed, I'm not clear of what's being used to do that, what geometry formats are being used. But I think that we're probably going to see USDC become more and more popular in the next couple of years. But it could be, how they start can be everything from FBX, OBJ, a lot of other things that are emblematic, are also ways to move these files from one place to the other. Next question.
And for our last question, Douglas Carmichael asked, Tuomo, you mentioned real-time 3D engines. Do you mean game engines like Unreal or Unity?
Yeah, there are dedicated 3D renderers for broadcast, which includes key and fill and integration to other layout gear like camera trackers and such. So there are companies like Visarty, Avid, Maestro, Chiron Hego, Wasp 3D, Brainstorm 3D, and all of these are broadcast dedicated real-time 3D renderers. Unreal can be used, but it's not best when you need to deal with real-time data coming over using a UDP stream or something like that.
Yeah, I will say that we're seeing, because of the way the licensing works in Unreal, we're seeing more and more people, and they did one thing. So when you're seeing AR graphics like on your phone, that might be Unreal or Unity. When you see it in broadcast, it's almost always, if it's not a proprietary engine, the way Tuomo was talking about, it's almost always Unreal. And the reason is that Unreal rebuilt their whole system so that it would support 2997 and 5994. And so that being able to do that drop frame, that process was something that broadcasters needed. And Unity decided not to invest in that. They decided that the phone and other things are their future. Unreal decided that was an important market for them. And the rumor is it was a lot of regearing to do that, to make sure that it clocked out correctly. And so because of that, we're seeing a lot of graphics engines using Unreal as a basis for it's not Unreal, it's not what we call vanilla Unreal. It is their version of that. So anyway, I think that was kind of fun. That was a good little, hopefully I think it's important for us. I'd like to do this more where we grab onto it. I have no idea whether this will be on YouTube later because I just broke a whole bunch of rules to show this all this stuff. So there's a high probability that while it fits legally within fair use in the United States, it may not last. So we may have to know that these kinds of experiences may just be for us. So we'll see how that goes and where that goes. So anyway, just warning everybody that if they go up later for it, this might be when you see these might be the ones that you have to kind of be here for. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, Bo and I were actually talking the other day, and that he didn't share with us this time.
Well, I don't want to call Bo out too much on the broadcast.
Well, but he said on a good day for his show.
I don't want to. I'm just going to keep cutting you off. I don't want to put words into Bo's mouth. Like anything that he said, he has to choose to say that. So sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Can I just say, well done, Liberty White, on the questions today. Very rarely, do we not have Bill or somebody else there, but beautiful job. Well done.
Yeah, great job. Thanks, Liberty. Are you at a new location? You look great.
Thanks. Yeah, I've got an accelerator program today, and I'm on a 6 Pro this time. So that's where 6K Pro. So there it is.
The lighting and everything else looks fantastic. So
Thanks,
really well done. Yeah. So hopefully you'll come back and join us again.
Mondays. Those are my days. Mondays.
Mondays? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just tell everybody. Then we're going to depend, then you'll be like, so you have to now see, now that you've said that, you're now committed to Mondays. So you have to tell me when you're not going to be here as opposed to when you're going to be here. Okay. So I'll plan accordingly. All right. Thanks, Liberty. And thanks to our producers who did a great job at asking great questions, and to our panelists, of course, who had a great conversation and held the ground while I don't know what I did, but I was moving so quickly right before the show that I hit something. I hit render and Final Cut for whatever reason just was like, nope. And then I came back and there was something wrong with the file, so I re-edited it. And so sorry for being a little distracted in the first hour. I was moving a lot of things. I usually have a rule of not doing that, is not doing anything during the show except for having the show. And so it's just that it was the only thing we had for the next thing was the thing. So I promise to do that ahead of time next time. It was just from last night. All right. We will see you all.